democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my Rothschild niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day peppering America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclose of it, close out the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit, bitch, if not, better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at you, I own every gold mine in South Africa, thanks baby, you made me a billion, plus I own a building, but each one of my children.
This is tonight's program, Voice of Rebellion Radio. This is your host, Chris J. I have Al Schwartz also here as co-host, and we have our special guest, the one you've been waiting for now for a whole week, Ray Lewis. Welcome to the show.
Chris, thanks for having me. I appreciate it and look forward to this next hour.
Okay. So, I'm going to have some questions I'm going to ask, and towards the show we might have some callers. Also, Al Schwartz has a few questions, but, you know, in light of all the things that happened recently in 2014, we had maybe the worst year we've had for police brutality, you know, and unjustified killings by police. We had over 1,000 people in 2014 were killed by the police in the United States. So the first thing I'm going to ask is, you know, this police militarization, this police brutality that has started, do you think this is part of a bigger plot, you know, to maybe make a militarized police force to be later used towards something martial law, an example?
Well, Chris, contrary to popular belief, police brutality, in my opinion, has not increased at all. What has increased is the possession of cell phones with video capability. What you're seeing now has gone on for years and years, but it always ended up as taking the officer's story as fact because there was no video to back up the opposing story. And so subsequently, you had a lot of brutality that went on, but no one was ever held accountable. In fact, they're still not being held accountable, by the way. But the public knows about it much more than they did years ago. But it's always been there.
But one thing I do have to ask is the police militarization that we've seen lately. Now we have police departments that have, you know, mine-resistant armored personnel carriers. We have police departments that have literally war tanks, you know, weapons of war on the street. You know, we have all these militaristic vehicles, these militaristic weapons, you know, small police departments like mine having, you know, here in Gulfport, Florida, a little suburb outside of St. Pete, having, you know, we have this practically like a small tank practically, you know, and we only have 12,000 people in this town. You know, small police departments are getting militaristic weapons.
Don't forget PTSD as well, Chris. All those soldiers coming back and joining the police forces.
Yeah, is this a part of a bigger plot? You know, we hear this, and I know you might now think, oh God, I fell into one of those conspiracy radio shows, but I have to ask, you know, you being a former, you know, police captain, do you think this is part of a plan towards martial law?
Okay, first, Chris, don't worry ever about me thinking it's a conspiracy program. Years ago, when I had some belief in my country, I was wary of conspiracy theories. Now, there is nothing this country could do that would shock me. Subsequently, there is no conspiracy that anybody could put out there to make me think they're a conspiracy nut. Okay, there's nothing beyond
That's
belief.
good to hear.
Yes, absolutely. It's unfortunate also. I mean, I hate saying that, but that's the truth. And if you can go back years and years, and there have been, just a shooting at JFK, that was in my time, early in my years. But now it would not surprise me at all that the government of this, the CIA of this government was behind it. So anything like that would not shock me anymore. Very sad commentary. But anyway, back to the militarization. I had seen
By the way,
pictures.
Ray, I like what you said. You said the government. You didn't say my government. That's very good.
Wow. That's interesting that you picked up that, Al. I didn't even think of that, but yes. I do not consider this my government. I do not consider this my flag. Subsequently, I refuse to fly it. But anyway, back to the militarization. I had seen pictures of it. I have read about it. I saw videos of it in different areas of the country. But it wasn't until I was in Ferguson, Missouri, in August, right after the shooting of Michael Brown. I flew out there when I realized that the police department, Police Chief Tom Jackson, was going to cover this up. That outraged me, and so I went out there to support the residents and to let them know that their outrage was justified, and that if white America wanted to, disparage them, they were going to have to also disparage me. But that was the first time I remember standing on West Florissant Avenue with hundreds of others protesting. And what do I see? I see these MRAPs, they're built like tanks, they're armored like tanks, they have a machine gun on top, and they probably have a lot more weapon capability that I didn't see. And they come rumbling down West Florissant Avenue, not at 4 o'clock in the morning when no one was there, but no, at 10 o'clock, when everybody was peacefully protesting. There was some chanting and shouting, yes, but everyone was peaceful. And seeing them drive down that street in a city in America actually gave me chills. I just stared at them in disbelief. One after the other came down the street. And that, to me, told me something, that this is a very, very dangerous sign here, that the police are becoming highly militarized.
And I remember, can I interject, Chris, and ask him a quick question, or you got another question for him?
Actually, no, if it goes along with that question, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to mention, I heard you in an interview before, Ray, talk about how police are recruited today. Are you familiar with the case of the prison guard? I don't know if you ever brought up the IQ test, the prison guard who wanted to be a cop, and the judge sided with the police because he was too smart to be a cop?
Yes.
I remember you talked about the sensitivity test, but the IQ, I mean, that's how they're recruiting cops now, right? Yeah.
Obviously, I'm glad you said now, because I don't know how long that was going on. And if it was going on in my day, that doesn't make me feel very good. But anyway, the fact is that looks like that is somewhat prevalent. That was not an isolated case, it appears. The other thing about that is that I know when I joined, about the first 100 and so applicants scored high were Vietnam vets. And that was because the city of Philadelphia was giving 10 extra points to veterans. And it was not so much as, well, let's do something for the vets in return for them serving the country. Had nothing to do with that, although that's what they put forth to the public. What it had to do with was vets, servicemen and women coming out were ideal for the police department in that their minds were already shaped to be brainwashed. They were very subservient to authority, and then they would do anything they were told to do immediately without even questioning the morality of it. Many of them had already killed people. Many of them slaughtered and then dropped napalm and whatnot. So these are the type of people that the city of Philadelphia and many other cities offered veterans extra points. And out of the first 100 and some, every single one was a vet. And because 10 points was enormous, The scoring in that police written test, and this has nothing to do with the psychological or personality test, it had totally to do with the written intelligence test.
Right.
It actually was divided into hundredths of a point. Let's say somebody scored a 92.87, next person might have scored a 92.89, and so if the scoring was that close by hundredths of a point, you can imagine what 10 whole points would do to a score. So like the first 100 and some were vets, and that was fine with the police department. That's what they wanted. And I believe they still do give preference to veterans. And at that time also, they gave no, and probably today also, they gave absolutely no extra points to college graduates.
Well, let me ask you this, Ray. Detectives, in order to become a police detective, do you have to have been a cop first?
Absolutely.
So if you're given the IQ test and you're given the sensitivity test, me as an investigative journalist, number one, I want to be sensitive to how a person's feeling, a victim of a crime, if I want to investigate a crime. Number two, I want to be intelligent to pick up on the evidence and to investigate. So what worries me now, Ray, is that if you got to be a cop first to be a detective, you think you want a detective with pretty high IQ and also sensitive to the victims and things like that, right?
Chris, you pointed out something that I did not even think of. Wow, you're right. Every detective comes from police patrol. Everybody that graduates from that police academy goes immediately into patrol. That's where you're driving around in a car and you're looking for crime on the street, and you also answer the radio calls for crime and all other type of calls for assistance. So you're right. You are not getting the highest intelligence going into the investigative work. And damn, I don't want to pay taxes I don't want to pay salaries to police officers if I'm a citizen and they're not the most intelligent investigators or the most intelligent patrol officers. I want a patrol officer that fully understands policy, knows when to shoot and not to shoot, knows when he's allowed to pursue another car at high speed through center cities. I want the highest intelligence. I can't think of any job where you would want somebody of lesser intelligence, because somebody of lesser intelligence most likely would never even go for a job that requires a little intelligence. You know, they'd be
right. They say they're going to be too bored because they're too intelligent. And this is Al, by the way. So when I was at Occupy, right, Bloomberg came to Boston. I went to New York. I was in Boston as well. That's where I'm originally from. And he came and gave a speech to Boston at the height of Occupy and said that the NYPD was his private army.
Oh,
so yeah, they're paid by tax dollars, but he considered these guys like his private army from Wall Street. You know,
that was such an insult to everybody in New York and everybody who ever thinks of going to New York. That right. He would state as a private army, and he never really received a lot of flack for it. I mean, this man should have been on TV the very next day apologizing for that remark, and yet he wore that remark as a badge. It reminded me of a former police commissioner in Philadelphia, a little before your years, Frank Rizzo. He was quite the, he was not a military man, but he was a strong, quote, law and order guy, and which means, you know, my way or the highway. And he once said that his Philadelphia Police Department could invade Cuba and win. And you don't need that kind of an attitude from a police commissioner or a mayor.
That's pretty arrogant right there, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so I'm going to go on to my next point.
Yeah.
You know, were you in the police department when the Philadelphia Police Department dropped the bomb?
Yes, I was.
On
yes, I was. I was May 1985. I was.
Okay,
that was
so
1 year old.
When that happened, I wasn't even born yet when that happened, but you know, this is just all out appalling when I found out about this, when that this even happened, and you know that this has been completely omitted from all textbooks. Such a horrible event. You know, you being in the police department at the time, I mean, what was your reaction? How could you even respond to that action being taken? I mean, 60 houses were destroyed, 11 people died, children died.
Philadelphia is the only police department in history that has ever dropped a bomb on its own citizens. And that whole episode came about because this organization called MOVE, M-O-V-E, and I don't know if it was an acronym. I don't know what that stood for. It's never really been explained, but it was not an acronym. Why they called themselves MOVE? Maybe like On the Move, On the March. I don't know.
I know why. It was because they're moving back to Africa. That was the point. That was the plan eventually.
Oh, yeah, like Marcus Garvey. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. They lived a different lifestyle. It was very, back to nature. They ate raw food. They did not send their kids to school. Homeschooling you have nowadays too. Not that they had that homeschooling. I'm not saying they did, and they were not. Their surroundings were somewhat unsanitary. In their backyard, there'd be garbage thrown out there. And I'm not saying nothing should have been done. They lived in a row house. They had neighbors on each side. And at night, to get their exercise, because they did not want to be caught by the police outside, they would run along the rooftops. And neighbors trying to sleep would hear this thump, 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 oftentimes, and not be able to sleep, and they had to get up early. So by no means am I saying something should not have been done, and they should have been left untouched. But you don't face a situation like that with the high degree of arms and manpower. The rifle. They actually had a machine gun stationed right across the street, and they asked the homes on that block to evacuate. People left their homes thinking they'd be away for a couple hours, and then they'd come back. And little did they know there was nothing to come back to later. But the police commissioner at that time, Greg Gore Sambor, was a big ex-military guy. He had a number of years in the military, and he attained rank in the military. He was coming from a military background where the way you handle confrontation is who's got the bigger stick, not negotiation. And so instead of having continued negotiation, his only thought process was, let's make sure we have more firepower than they did, because they were armed. They did have rifles, and they did have shooting posts on their house. They had a bunker they made up on their house, and so they could, shoot out of that. But the kids often went to a city park a block down from their house almost every day. One of the mothers would take them. And the police had every opportunity for day after day to then take the children. Social services had an order from the court that the children were not being properly cared for and that they could be taken. And did they take the children? And when they were out there in the park? No. They just did not use options that they could have. They could have stopped food. People came and gave them food every day. They could have stopped those people from doing that. And there were many different ways they could have negotiated with this group, but they went right to the strong power, and we all know the result of that.
I wanted to ask you, you have another question for him, Chris?
Yeah, well, another thing is that, a lot of people, because of, the type of movement that was a, somewhat of a Black Panther type movement, kind of close to it. Some people also talk about, what I want to ask is that when you were all those years in the police, did you see institutionalized racism inside the police department? Did you see these kind of attitudes amongst fellow officers?
Yes. I hesitate to say institutionalized because it was not sanctioned by the police department, but it was allowed. Let's put it that way. Oftentimes, your bosses, and when I say often, I mean often, a high percentage of the time, bosses would look the other way, and actually bosses were part of the racism. So although it wasn't officially sanctioned by the department, it was allowed, and it was rampant.
Yeah, that's what I would expect. It was, after the civil rights movement and everything, but yet, so they couldn't have in the rule books that racism was allowed, but they could, just look the other way when racial incidents happened. I know I'm kind of moving topics kind of quickly, but I want to go to a major, topic. As an officer, and I've said this many times on the show, that this, our whole, as a country, our whole policy towards drugs and fighting this war on drugs has failed. We wasted so much money, and we've at times, the United States government has funded people who, traffic drugs in Central America. What I want to ask is, as an officer, do you think we need a whole new policy? We need to end the war on drugs. And and part two of this question, do you think that police departments, like a whistleblower once alleged from L.A. that police departments have been responsible for trafficking drugs into certain communities?
Okay, the first part of your question, I consider the war on drugs to have been the worst policy.
I'm on the air. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I consider the war on drugs the most horrific mistake ever made by police departments. This war on drugs has been going on for more than 50 years. Now, and if anything, there's more drugs on the street now than ever. The drug program has been a colossal failure. It has destroyed cities. It has destroyed innocent people's lives, but it's made money for some other people. There's a lot of people that are making money off of this, including cops. Drug arrests are a cash cow for cops. And cops do not make drug arrests to clean up a community. Cops make drug arrests for the overtime, pure and simple. And when you have cops making drug arrests just for the sake of making an arrest, you also then get individuals that perhaps don't have as much drugs as you say they did in your report, or they don't have any drugs, but you have extra drugs around. That you want that arrest, you want that overtime, and you just see anybody near a drug corner as a drug dealer, and you don't have any qualms about arresting that person. And so it's a cash cow for cops, it's a cash cow for lawyers, judges, prisons. Now you have for-profit prisons, and it's a humane society would never have such a program. A humane society would have all this money that goes into drug enforcement into drug treatment programs. And then by far, marijuana has got to be made legal. It should have always been legal.
It almost became legal in Florida recently by a 2% margin. We needed to have a 60% vote. Yeah.
Yes, I read that. And I think it was only your huge white senior population that probably defeated it. And because they are still ignorant of marijuana and the benefit it does and how it actually destroys the economy and the city's tax base, and by making sure all these young men are arrested, primarily young black men.
Yes.
Okay. I had. Go ahead, Chris. If you have another question.
I have one more question, and then we can go to your questions.
Okay.
But the last question I have is because I think now that I've gotten comfortable, I know that you actually believe that our government has lied on many things, including these supposed conspiracy theories. I just want to ask, what is your opinion on false flag, false flag terrorism, or and all these, do you think that this has been done in the past? And I'm not talking about one specific incident. I'm just saying, 9/11. Do you think that any of them were, ever since Operation Northwoods was put into place in the 1960s? Do you think this is a practice the government has done?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't know it when I was a child, but we thought, the Red Menace, communists, were the worst devils in the world. We thought they didn't even look like us. That they had horns and whatnot. They were described so badly, and we had to fear them. And we would have air raid tests that we would crawl under our desks in school, and it was because the communists were coming. And as a child, you growing up, of course, if you believe in Santa Claus, of course you're going to believe in communism being a threat to your lives, not only your liberty but your lives. I mean, I wasn't taught that communism was a party. It was not. Every Russian was not a communist. But to me, everybody over there, if you were Russian, you were automatically communist, and you wanted to kill me and take everything I have. And so that was my first experience with the red flag, but I didn't know it. And then over the years, they always think of something to keep America's eye off of what's really going on, what is really detrimental to them, and that's the filthy rich having policies that are draining America's pocketbook, but enriches them. And while we're chasing these red herrings, we're not looking at what the filthy rich are doing.
And then I'm going to go to one specific incident, though, and this is a big one, and this is one that, people will say you're crazy for believing, even though there's so much evidence towards it. September 11th. That's just September 11th, 2001. Do you think that was a false flag? If you're not comfortable answering it, you don't have to.
At first I did not, but the more I read different things, the more I studied what was coming out, the more I read a report by a group of engineers in this country that realized from their engineering knowledge that this was a determined explosion, and that they went into detail about the thermite that was found, and that's found in incendiary devices like was used to destroy these towers. I realized that, hey, here's another gig where my government is trying to get over on me. And so I have no problem with believing that what our government told us about it is totally not true.
And the government doesn't represent us, right? I mean, when we were part of Occupy, that's why we call each other the 99%, right? Because, they represent the elites now, the corporations, the banks, Wall Street.
Yes, the government and Wall Street, they're one and the same. The government is just the talking heads for Wall Street. That's all they are. And you notice when this big healthcare, you notice when this big healthcare was coming about and Obamacare and whatnot, all those politicians that voted against Obamacare or voted against universal care. I don't care for Obamacare myself. I wanted universal care. And,
right, me too.
So when I say,
in Europe, I experienced that when I lived there a couple of years, yeah.
That's the way it should be. That's what I want my taxes used for.
Or a public university.
You got it. But what it got me that every politician that voted against universal health care, they all have health care for them, their family, and their life. Even if they retire.
Right, because they're politicians and they're getting paid with our tax dollars, and they have all these benefits and this salary and then all these money from the lobbies that's basically bribes. And where do they get off trying to cut off food stamps to poor people? And most people on food stamps in this country are white people in red states. So all this stereotype about blacks and food stamps, that's just statistically inaccurate.
But see, Wall Street got every white people to believe that. Ronald Reagan started it with the welfare queen, driving up to get her food stamps in a pink Cadillac. And so this stuck. Ronald Reagan knew what he was doing. Ronald Reagan was one of the biggest pawns of the filthy rich. And so all the people now, they're against helping the poor people because they think it's black people that they're helping that just buy liquor with their money and just buy expensive Cadillacs. And so, again, the rich are behind all of this prejudice and bias and discrimination.
Division, right? They want to divide and conquer.
Oh, yeah.
But I wanted to go on with the question I had prepared.
But as long as they have the right to fight each other, nobody will uprise. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, that's true.
I just wanted that comment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I had 4 questions left here. First, I wanted to ask you, Ray, about the case of Mumia out of Philly. He's what many consider a political prisoner. He was affiliated with the Black Panthers. A lot of people said he was set up. He didn't really kill that officer. What do you think about that case?
Well, I was actually working the night that happened, and the radio was a buzz with all kind of police chatter going on. And although I did not work in his district. He worked in his. Danny Faulkner, the officer that was killed, was working in a Center City district, and for. At that time, had been on the force for 4 years, and from what I read in the newspapers are owned by your filthy rich, and the TV stations are owned by your filthy rich.
You were then too.
Fell in line with every other cop and every other Philadelphian and many other people who were following this case, we thought he was guilty. And I read then, there's a book written by David Lindroth. It's called Killing Time. It's specifically about Mumia Abu-Jamal, the shooting. And he went into such detail that nobody could read that book and not feel that Mumia did not get a fair trial. Now, that's a little different. And David Lindroth, in the beginning of the book, he said, I am not making a case that Mumia was innocent, but he said, I am making the case that he did not get a fair trial. And after reading that book, no one can come away with the belief that he did not get a fair trial.
Well, he got off death row, right? He's facing life in prison now, but there's people also saying that he was set up. If you look at the history of COINTELPRO, or what Chris calls false flag, that's kind of a false flag as well. When you're setting people up, when you're going after their reputation, they did it with activists and Occupy. I mean, when groups are infiltrated, like the Black Panthers were, to divide, as we were talking about earlier. So you think it's possible that Mumia was actually just set up? He didn't actually pull the trigger?
Well, Chris, like I have said before. Oh, wait, this is Al, right? Al?
Yeah, you got me.
Al, I'm sorry, Al. Al, right. Like I said before, I never thought that. For years and years. But like I said, nothing could shock me that our government was behind. Surprise me, yes. I could still be a little surprised that the government did this or that, but nothing could shock me. And you should live in a country where your government could shock you by doing something as deplorable. So I would not rule that out, what you just asked about that being a setup.
Okay, my next question is about police unions. Chris and I are very pro-worker. But at the same time, we realize that in many cases, unfortunately, unions can be used for there to be impunity, for officers to get away with things that they shouldn't have. So what is your view on how to curtail that with unions?
There's only one way. Unions, like everything else, like every other elected position, the president of a union and his board, a board has a vice president, a treasurer, a secretary, all kind of positions, maybe 10, 12 positions. Police officers vote for the entire board, and just like any other politician, prior to the election, the people running for office and the incumbents that are already in there, they send out plenty of mailings to every officer, active and retired. Active and retired can vote. And what you have then is very expensive mailings coming out. They're glossy. You get more, and they're going out to 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 people. And there's multiple mailings. You get these pens with vote for so and so, and they're stuffed in packages. And you have ads in newspapers, and you have ads over the radio. Thousands and thousands of dollars. That money does not come out of the pocket of the cops that are running for office. It comes from financial institutions. The Philadelphia Fraternal Order of Police, the Philadelphia Police Officer Union, it's called the Fraternal Order of Police, they put out a quarterly magazine called The Peace Officer. That peace officer has page after page of advertisement, and most of it is from financial institutions, banks, and you name it. They heavily subsidize that magazine through their advertising, and they are big supporters of the police financially, of the police union. They contribute to these people. The president, when I was arrested at Occupy, the president, John McNesby, mailed me a letter, certified letter, I had to sign for it and everything, telling me that the police pension director had filed a grievance against me, and my hearing was on April 4th, such and such a time.
I remember you talked about that, yeah. Because you were in uniform. They didn't like that you were in uniform, but you had guts, I got arrested in the movement, too. I mean, you had guts there, but you pissed off some people, and you weren't expecting that, right, when you got back to Philly.
Oh, well, I didn't get back to Philly. I was told, I was called that I had this certified letter at home. I was told in New York City.
So you got it pretty soon after, huh?
Yeah, about 10 days, week to 10 days. I also got one from the Philadelphia Police Commissioner, Charles Ramsey, highly threatened me, ordering me to stop. And if I did not stop, he would take any and all necessary action to stop me, to protect the integrity of the uniform. I mean, that's thug language.
They're talking about your pension right there. That's pretty severe.
Yeah. We'll go back to that. That was the union. John McNesby. Yeah, that is very severe. And now the Philadelphia Daily News then did an article on this, and what they found out was that the Fraternal Order Police, Philadelphia Union, they had on their pension payrolls a number of felons who had committed crimes, gone to prison, and a couple of them were still in prison and were receiving a pension. Others had come out and were still. Their pensions never stopped. They never had hearings. One of them was a convicted child abuser. He was teaching. He was a mounted officer, and he has since passed away. But he was a mounted officer, and he taught at a local riding academy.
That means, the ones that on the horse, yes.
Yeah, and here there was a 14-year-old girl he was teaching, and he ended up having sex with her on numerous occasions. Well, do you think and he was convicted of that. Do you think that John McNesby, the president of the union, sent him a letter saying there was a grievance filed by the pension director? No. But they sent one to me because the banks did not care about this cop molesting a 14-year-old, but the banks did not want me protesting at Wall Street.
Well, look at Epstein, right? This guy Epstein just got charged with pedophilia. You have so many high-level people that he knew. He knew Alan Dershowitz, Bill Clinton. I mean, and the bankers could care less if this guy was a pedophile. And maybe they used it to try to blackmail him. But finally, he got caught doing what he was doing. This case is coming out now. It's unbelievable.
Okay, now that's interesting.
There's another billionaire.
I'm not familiar with.
There's another billionaire out there.
I'll make sure to send you a link on that on Facebook, Ray, about the Epstein case. But it's unbelievable right now. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's not just him, though. It's not just him. There was another billionaire that
they're also accusing Dershowitz. And it's funny because I never know Norman Finkelstein, and I got to meet him through Occupy. And Dershowitz got Finkelstein kicked out of DePaul University. Finkelstein's an activist. I'm sure you heard of him. But, now Dershowitz is caught up in this, too.
Wow. Doesn't surprise me. But
and he's not the first.
Yeah, go ahead.
He's not the first. Not even close. There was a billionaire that was recently put on trial, and then he only got 3 months, even though that he had raped this kid was less than 10 years old. I mean, in 3 months only. It just says what money, they control the judicial system. They control your government.
Well, they get money through the sex slavery as well. They're getting money through all different types of stuff. They're like a mob.
They control the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. I confronted Justice Scalia at a protest through Occupy. Occupy gave us a base to confront a lot of powerful people.
Yes, it did.
My next question for you, Ray. I was arrested a couple times through Occupy as well, and I know you were recently arrested in Ferguson. What is that like for you personally when you're going through that, especially in uniform? What goes through your mind? What do you feel when you're going through a situation like that? I know I felt a lot of pride when I went through that, and it's hard for people to understand unless they've been in those circumstances what it's like to be arrested in an act of civil disobedience. What was that like for you, Ray, considering your background and everything?
Yeah. Okay, I was not arrested in Ferguson.
I must have misinformed that. Yeah.
Well, here's what happened. A lot of people got confused about that. It's funny. Chris Rock, I got on Twitter not too long ago because somebody told me, you just got to get more well known. Your statement is too strong. Facebook is not enough. You have to try every avenue. And so I got on Twitter, and shortly after I was on, it was right after Ferguson that Chris Rock put on his Twitter a picture of me getting arrested in New York City, and also next to that was a picture of me in Ferguson holding a sign that said, "Police, end open season on black men."
Right.
Chris Rock thought that was so great that he put it on his Twitter, and obviously he has so many followers that they all got a hold of it, and word spread like wildfire. And people misinterpreted that the picture of me getting in New York City was also at Ferguson. But anyway.
Well, yeah, a lot of people didn't know that you got arrested in New York, too. I already knew that, but yeah.
Yeah. So I can comment on what it was like being arrested in New York City. And when I went down there, I told the people there, listen, I'm here to be used use me any way you like. I'm here because I have this uniform. I support you 100%. And if you see how I can help you other than just standing here in Zuccotti Park with a sign, let me know. So a fellow asked me, listen, we're going to be having a big rally around Wall Street on Thursday, the 17th of November. November 17th, 2011.
Okay. I got arrested December, that year. Yeah.
Okay. That was
December
my
10th was the first time, yeah.
Oh, okay. Shortly after me then. And when I went to that rally at Wall Street, I had absolutely no intention of getting arrested. It never even entered my mind. Never entered my mind. But while I was standing with a sign, and there were thousands of us, I noticed all these young kids being dragged in the street past me, and they all had those plastic flex cuffs on. And I thought, holy cow. Yeah, and I'm thinking, these kids, this incident, that was 3 days after the police destroyed Zuccotti Park. They totally went out and stole everybody's equipment, packs, sleeping bags, computers. They were obliterated.
The puppies, you know about the puppies tent? I have a friend, her puppy was in that tent.
I don't doubt it at all. Don't doubt it.
Yeah, they did terrible damage to the tent with animals in it, and just a tragic thing, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't care. And so anyway, what hit me was these kids are being arrested. Well, not kids. They were young people. But, to me, they could be my grandchildren. But they were willing to be arrested, and they were willing to sacrifice both their health and welfare, and also they did not have any idea how long they would be locked up. They could have been locked up for a day, a week, a month, but they didn't care. They were fighting for justice.
They signed NDAA the day after I got out of jail, and I knew I could have been sent to Guantanamo, and I still refused the deal because at that point I was willing to sacrifice everything for the cause.
How about that? Wow. I did not know.
We fought it in Boston. We got on the front page of the Boston Herald. They had an article, Are They Idiots? Are They Patriots? And they put our mugshots on the front page, yeah.
Wow, what a headline. What a headline. But anyway,
and if you know the Boston Herald, they're pretty conservative. But we had one supporter write an article in favor of us, at least then.
Oh, geez, how about that? But when I saw that, these guys, these young people doing that, and then I realized this happened just 3 days after they were brutalized in Zuccotti Park, it made me also think they don't know what's going to happen to them once they're outside of the camera. I mean, they were getting beaten with inside of cameras. What could happen to them outside of cameras?
Yeah, they beat Cecily into a seizure, and we interviewed her when she got out of jail, and I was there when that happened.
And they beat a lot of others. And so it was like, here you go. They're willing to get beaten, and even worse, beaten outside of the view of cameras, and they don't care because they're putting justice ahead of their own welfare. That's so
it's greater than ourselves, yep.
Yeah, that so inspired me that I just put down my sign and I joined them. And initially, the police walked around me and got people behind me. Well, I would get up and I would walk around and get in front of the next row of protesters, and they walked around me again. And I got up, and then they said, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I said, "Arrest me. I want to be arrested." And then they had no option, and so they arrested me. But I never regretted it. In fact, I'm quoted in Time magazine, and I think I said it on a few times on once on Rachel Maddow's show, I think it was, that walking across that intersection handcuffed was the proudest moment of my life.
Exactly. And I have a quote here that with your picture, I believe it's from your profile picture. I can see part of the quote here where it says, I will not idly stand by while law enforcement is administered only to the poor and disenfranchised.
Yes, yeah.
Et cetera. It takes a lot of guts, and we want to commend you for your bravery, especially coming from a police background.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I appreciate that. And I believe I said that at Philadelphia, at a rally at Philadelphia Independence Park with Philadelphia Occupy. I also worked with Philadelphia Occupy.
I wanted to ask you about something as well. A former member of Occupy Philly. His name was Marty Droll, and he was a friend of mine. And I was in Philly in the fall of 2013, and he showed me around that city, and we had a conference with Sherry Honkala, who I'm aware you know as well.
You met Sherry Honkala.
Yeah, I was one of the organizers of Occupy RNC, and she came down here to Tampa, Florida, and I got to meet her and Marty as well around that time in 2012.
Yes.
Right. But there was a tragedy, and I mentioned it to you before. This past summer, Marty died in mysterious circumstances in Philly. And what I wanted to ask you was if Sherry, because I'm in touch with Sherry now, and we're trying to organize something, a protest to bring awareness to his death. What I wanted to ask you is, would you be willing, if we set up a date with a protest in Philly with Sherry and other comrades for what happened with Marty, would you be willing to go? Would you be willing to look into it?
You hit the key phrase here. I would be willing to. I would want to look into it. And it's funny you should say that, because I did not know the name when you mentioned the name, but I remember now reading something about a mysterious death of an individual there, and so that's obviously what I'm remembering. And but
you might have met Marty. He was a redheaded kid, a very handsome kid. He was 25 years old, brilliant. He had been on Russia Today TV. He was a wonderful man, and he was not suicidal at all. And there's really a lot of mystery behind how he died.
Yes. That was what hit me, that there was way too much mystery. There were way too many unanswered questions. And so, yes, you send me the information, and Philadelphia is, unfortunately, Philadelphia is where I'm most hated by the cops. But that's okay. I will be going down there Monday, Martin Luther King Day, for a demonstration, a protest march. And if you have something in Philadelphia about this individual, please send me information on it, and I would be more than likely willing to assist you in that.
I appreciate that. I'm in touch with his family, and we're doing everything we can to shed light on this. And unfortunately, even though he'd been on Russia Today TV a couple of times, they haven't done a report on it or anything. There hasn't really been a lot of mention in media. But, yeah, I think if we have a protest and we get some awareness to it, we can look into it. Huh?
There's never mention of it by the media. They don't want to bring that to light. That would only that information would work against them.
Yeah, I mean, but you think alternative media, right? But I guess you just got to have more people join the Justice for Marty group and more people protest on the ground there, and then I think that we could get the ball rolling, get some people in the alternative media at least to talk about it. Have you seen Selma yet? The new Martin Luther King movie?
I did not, but I read some reviews in alternative media, and they said it was terrific.
Yeah, I saw it the day before it was supposed to go out. Luckily, there was a theater here. They played it early, and I think it really showed how Martin Luther King was. I mean, like Frederick Douglass said, there's no progress without struggle, without demand. So he was demanding from Johnson that the Voting Rights Act be passed, and Johnson kept saying you have to hold this off, and you know, people were dying in the streets, children. I mean, in Selma. And that's when Martin Luther King, took on Washington, and I think that's really when the plan started to assassinate him. But the film really shows the tensions between Hoover, Johnson, MLK, Governor Wallace, and Alabama. I think the movie was pretty factual, and I think it really is going to inspire activism. As a matter of fact, you might think this is silly, Ray, but Chris and I. Well, I don't know how big a fan Chris is, but I'm a big fan of the Hunger Games movies. And
I'm not familiar with them.
They are fictional, and they are for young people, although some older people can like them too. But the interesting thing about the Hunger Games is, I'm sure that George Orwell has influenced this movie. Because if you look at 1984, I mean, it takes place in a post-apocalyptic time. And these young people have to be forced into these Hunger Games to survive, and then there's a revolution that starts, and all these things happen. And I think that the movie is also influential for activists. And Michael Moore said once, and I've met him. I don't always agree with Michael Moore, but I respect the man. Michael Moore said once that, I make movies against capitalism, and capitalists fund me. Because they want to make a profit, so they don't care really about the content. But ironically, even within Hollywood, there's movies that can inspire activism to go against that very system. Don't you agree?
Absolutely, I agree. Yes, because the filthy rich, if they can make more money, even exposing some of their schemes, they'll do it. Because that's how sociopathic they are for more money.
Absolutely. And I want to mention this on the air. I don't know if any of my family members are listening, but I had a great uncle who died in the line of duty in Boston and before I was born in the early 80s. So, I'm not anti-police at all. And when I was in Boston, I wrote an article about this, about my uncle and about my take on the police and how, they're workers too and they're being used by the 1%. And people came up to me, and mentioned the city where my uncle was from. I mean, the part of town part of Boston where my uncle was from that I didn't even know. They came and they gave me information that I didn't even know. Yeah, I mean, there was people from all different backgrounds, including your background, that were part of Occupy. There was a lot of stereotypes. I'm sure you're well aware of this, Ray. A lot of stereotypes that there were just a bunch of young hippies and we didn't want to work. I work and study, and I come out of the Occupy movement, and we made mistakes, but I think most of the people were well-intentioned. It was infiltrated towards the end. There was a lot of COINTELPRO going on, a lot of division. There wasn't enough organization. But I think it was started by people with good intentions from different generations and different backgrounds, right?
Absolutely. But I disagree with you on one thing. It was infiltrated much earlier than towards the end.
Well, you have a point. A lot of the facilitators in the very beginning probably had ulterior motives. But what I'm saying is the masses of the people that joined initially mostly were people well-intentioned. But unfortunately, those people that were placed in there in those positions, as well as new people, came and caused a lot of division. I talk about that in the book. I published a couple books myself, self-published, Solidarity Forever, The Struggle of an Occupy. My last one's The Unfinished Revolution. And I think that if you're going to work within the system, and you can find it on Amazon, but I think I want to send you a free copy, right? But I think that if you can work within the system and reform things, it's futile. You know what I mean? You have to work outside the system now, and you have to form a revolutionary movement, and you have to make steps to prevent your movement from being infiltrated and divided up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I will say in my very beginning of getting involved, I would not have agreed with you. But unfortunately, Al, I have to agree with you now. It's not going to happen within this present system.
Absolutely. We're in the last couple minutes. I know you agreed to talk for an hour. Chris, you wanted to make any comments further to what Ray was saying?
Well, first I'm going to put up the number 347-205-9576 in case any of the callers or anybody wants to call in. To those listening online, that is 347-205-9576. Ray, it's great to see, you and the Occupy movement, you're the complete opposite of what, a lot of people would consider the stereotypical occupier. People would think probably people like me, long hair, kind of looks like a hippie,
yeah,
young.
Sure, it looks more like a hippie now. I used to look like a hippie, but
I really do. I have the long hair and everything. I mean, I haven't cut my hair in a year, so now I look like a stereotypical occupier. People think that Occupy...
My hair grows so fast I couldn't do that. It'd be too long. Ray's got his hat on with his uniform. That's good for him. I wear my hats when my hair gets too long,
people. I think a lot of people in this country do not even know what Occupy really is about. They don't get that this is the resistance to a tyrannical government that has become increasingly authoritarian over the years. People think it's a bunch of hippies sitting around in a circle, singing Kumbaya and stuff.
Yeah.
But there's also a lot of more awareness than there used to be. Ray made a good point in the beginning of the show that a lot of this brutality is just as brutal as it was in the 80s and other times, but now there's more awareness to it. Now there's more social media and things like that.
Absolutely.
Yes, but when I talk more awareness, when I talk about increasingly authoritarian, what I mean by that is that recently our government has went, just off the defense with the kind of laws that have been making, like the Patriot Act in 2000, right after the 9/11, they had the Patriot Act. That
and NDAA
now. Yeah, that's the big one. I mean, if people knew, I feel like not that many people in America even know that they can be hauled off to jail and never released in the name of national security. And that's just one of many of these, laws. And we have eventually, talks about the Second Amendment being completely voided. I mean, most of the Bill of Rights has been voided over with laws in the name of national security.
Yes.
one question I have to ask is, do you think that there'll be, many of these good cops? Every revolution, there's been cops, people that were in the law enforcement of that country that are supposed to be loyal to the government that eventually turned on the government and worked with the people, with the revolutionaries. Like in Russia, the Imperial Guard turned on the Tsar, and that led to the revolution in Russia. Do you think the same would happen in the case of a revolution of the people in the United States?
No, I don't. Primarily, the police recruit people who are not of that nature. Police recruit people through their psychological tests that they give. They recruit people who will obey authority and continue to obey authority and will not question authority. So
what about the Oath Keepers, though? You got the Oath Keepers. You got former veterans. Former soldiers that are willing to defend the people now. They're in Ferguson. Some of them are just defending property, but other ones I think really want to defend the people. Yeah. So there's some exceptions there. They're not necessarily police officers, but there's some exceptions, right? The people that could be our allies.
There are definitely exceptions. But to me, those exceptions come nowhere near the number of exceptions you would need to really put up a force against any type of military or police departments. They would just would not have a chance right now.
Which is why I think we need to have a revolution that's nonviolent as well. I'm a firm believer in self-defense, but at the same time, I think that if we have an alternative media that gets to enough people and enough attention to the nonviolent tactics and civil disobedience, that could make a difference as well.
Well, boy, Al, you hit the nail on the head. I feel,
right.
And I've gone around with a sign even, and it says, warning, massive civil disobedience is next. And that, if you, when I say massive, I mean massive. If you get 1 million people surrounding Wall Street, or you get 1 million people surrounding the White House, what is law enforcement or even the military going to do with 1 million people? Where are they going to put them? And the media.
You had 100,000 people for the climate change rally recently. That was more than what Occupy had. Why don't those same people also, get a consensus on all these issues and all come together and, get 100,000 or 1 million people, right?
But that was only 100,000. That was not civil disobedience. That was only a protest.
Right.
You have to have 1 million, not protest. Hey, even 1 million protesting is not going to do any good. I was at the climate change march in New York City in September, and we had some 410,000. That was not even mentioned by one single politician. Not one single politician on any level mentioned that. Now, if you had 400,000 committing civil disobedience, that's different. People have got to
boycotts and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a firm belief now that protesters. Well, I was at the New York City Black Lives Matter a month and a half ago, where you had about 50,000. That was never mentioned anywhere, and no politician got moved by that to change any laws or closely.
Well, you see that in Selma. You see the people crying in front of the TV. White people, middle-class people that went down to Selma and died or were killed by the KKK for defending blacks. You don't have that today. Also. You don't have so many people on the TV seeing people getting beat up. There's barely anybody that heard of Cecily, because now the media is more corrupt than it was in the 60s, which is why we need to organize an alternative media.
Yes, which you guys have been doing very well, by the way, but it's still not like your major media. We still cannot reach mainstream white America. And
most Americans know the system's unfair, but they're not doing anything about it because they're too fearful or complacent.
Well,
therefore, activism and alternative media have to work together to wake the people up, to make the people want to act on what they really know. We're in the age of information here. People know, they're not doing anything about it.
And massive civil disobedience is the best way to bring that to white America, in my estimation. Protests are not being aired. 400,000 the climate change. Mainstream America did not become aware of that. Mainstream America has no knowledge of that. They had no knowledge of the 50,000 that got out to protest in New York City. Black Lives Matter. So you have to bring something to make sure it gets to their attention. And to me, the best nonviolent way to do that is through massive civil disobedience, where you shut this government down, be it the White House or Wall Street or anything else that somebody can think of that would be effective. We've been doing
another way is to
now.
get off the computer and get on the streets.
Yes.
Organizing on the computer is fine, but eventually you got to go to the streets, right?
Has to.
We're speaking from action here. So.
You have to, the Egyptian revolution was organized on the internet, but eventually it went out to the streets. And you talk about numbers. They put, at times, millions in Cairo. They put, hundreds of thousands in a small area of Cairo. They really intimidated, the military and the police, and they couldn't do anything about it. So that's why they eventually had to submit to the people's will. Now, did it end up good? That's debatable. But, what I do think that needs to be done, honestly, is that it needs to remain peaceful as long as we can, if that's possible. However, when your opponent is not peaceful, peaceful revolution is impossible. And it's like what JFK once said: those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent one inevitable. And that's what we need is to be ready for that moment. We need to have a militia. We need to also, we can't be just protesters. We have to be ready to defend ourselves. Now, we shouldn't be going violent as option A. That's option B. But, we need people that are also ready to defend themselves and not just sit there and be sitting ducks.
Well, that's what the Oath Keepers are for. The Oath Keepers are veterans. Yes. They're well-trained in what they're doing, and a lot of them do not suffer from PTSD or anything like that, and they're people that have conscience, and they're not dumb, and they know what they're doing. And I think if a lot of those Oath Keepers that are in Ferguson, I don't know if they're still on the ground over there, but a lot of them that are, there to defend properties and to prevent rioting and things like that, which of course we're against. We're against rioting. Things have to be organized. But, those Oath Keepers, they could also be there to defend the people. And that if there are orders to fire on the people, they can be there to be a buffer zone between the two,
There's no doubt about that, Al. I just question how many would really be available if, in fact, time came, because you would need a tremendous number of them to combat the forces that the government has.
That's a good point.
Yes. The government does have high-tech weapons, drones, all kinds of, sophisticated technology. So, of course, numbers are important. Numbers, though, if we have, swamping them, like I said, in Cairo, it was a couple million, a few million was the number. Here, it'd probably be, unfortunately, we're going to need more because we're talking about a bigger enemy. We're talking about the biggest, the biggest military power in the world that could easily turn the military on its own people.
80% of Americans are armed. So it's not a question of are we armed enough, right? That's almost irrelevant. Switzerland, they have the most people armed after the United States and Yemen, and it's the lowest crime rate in the world because they train their kids how to shoot from a young age. They're well trained. A lot of gun deaths here are accidental. So, it's a question of being organized, being responsible, being disciplined and trained in doing what you're doing and being willing to defend the people. That's really what it comes down to.
It's whether or not the citizens are ready to defend themselves. They have the guns, and it's that to take that one step up and be from protester to be someone that's ready to defend themselves, ready to get their hands a little dirty if that is what it takes. If they're fired upon, will they point the guns back at the government? Many would be too fearful to do that.
Well, Chris, you hit it on. Chris, you hit it on the head. I think when you said, "Are they willing to do that?" And the filthy rich have realized that. And what the filthy rich, and by the way, I call them the filthy rich because I think it's much more appropriate name for these people instead of the 1%. The 1% really doesn't describe them. These people are sociopaths. Anybody who has $1 billion and is trying to destroy people's lives, pay the minimum wage, destroy the environment so they can make more than $1 billion every year is a sociopath. And so to me, they're filthy rich. And these people know to stop this revolution you're talking about. They allow Americans, white Americans, to maintain a class, a style of living that is just sufficient enough so they won't resort to violence against the filthy rich. In other words, they'll take away their pensions, they take away their health care, they don't raise minimum wage. And they're getting away with that because most Americans still say, "Okay, well, I still have a job." I can't tell you how many times I heard people saying, even though they're on minimum wage, they say, well, at least I have a job. You know, so many other people.
Well, you know what they do in job interviews now, Ray? They ask for your Facebook password, and I would just refuse to accept the job. I would say no, I'm not going to accept the job where you're forcing me to give you my Facebook password. But a lot of times, other people don't have that option, and they have to erase their Facebook, and it's just an intrusion of privacy.
But they don't. You mentioned the key words. They don't have that option. They have a mortgage to pay. They have food bills to pay. So they're forced into that minimum wage job. They're forced to delete their Facebook pages and whatnot. And so they have to go along with it for survival. And as long as they can survive like that, as long as they still can pay their bills, they're not going to join a revolution. So you're going to have a major economic collapse in this country before enough people would resort to really combating the filthy rich.
You have 80% near poverty line. Literally right now, 80% of Americans are checked away from being homeless. So we're not quite there yet, but we're pretty close. If you consider it. And the way the unemployed are counted is also manipulated. You know, it's when you're on the benefits. So the actual numbers of people unemployed is much higher than what the government's saying.
Exactly. But the filthy rich are doing a good job of keeping the ones that are suffering the most to be the minorities, primarily blacks. And that is for a reason. Because if they do have to put down any type of uprising, it'll be a lot started by blacks, and white America will be fully behind putting down any uprising by black people.
And there was a lot of people rioting that were white in Ferguson.
Yes,
so,
yes. But the media primarily showed the blacks looting and breaking the windows. Because I followed CNN the whole time when I was not out on the street, and they just showed the same blacks breaking windows, the same burning of buildings, the same shouting of Michael Brown Jr.'s stepfather, burn this place down, burn this place down. I swear they ran that every 10, 15
I don't know
minutes.
how Don Lemon, who's a black man and seems sympathetic to the protesters, can be on the ground there and look at white protesters rioting and just let CNN Live cover the black rioters. He should step up and say, hey, there's whites doing the same thing, but you know what? He'd be fired. Because there's been a lot of journalists that on the so-called mainstream media that have been fired over saying stuff on the air that they shouldn't have.
He would be fired. Yes. So he's between a rock and a hard place, and it's not. And no other station would hire him either. He'd be blackballed. He'd have to
maybe Russia Today would, right? Who knows? I mean, some people are leaving, the CNN and going on or becoming hosts of alternative channels.
Yeah, but that's by choice, basically. You know, they're not going to get fired and be hired to do that by another channel.
Oh, yeah, there's no guarantee they'd be hired by that channel at all. It'd be a risk.
Yeah. Well, the filthy rich would blackball the person. They'd make sure that person would not get another job.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Ray, for this interview. We went into about an hour and 15 minutes. We got about 15 minutes left, Chris and I, to talk about what we discussed with you. Nobody's called in, but I'm sure the people are listening, and, I look forward to continue to communicate with you. Chris, any final thoughts?
Yes, and at first when I didn't really know what to think, when I was going into this interview, but then when I hear about you talking about, the billionaires that are ruining this country, that's the true minority that's ruining this country. And then when I heard, you talk about this is not my government, this is a government that oppresses me, that tries to oppress me, this is the government, not my government. I found out that, you are very similar to how I think about the government. And, and it's really cool to see, an occupier that's really outside the norm of Occupy.
Yeah,
and a former police captain, and there's a lot of people listening out there. None did call in, but I know that there's many different people listening out there. I promoted this show across, international boundaries. There'll be people listening in other continents, right now, probably. And they get to hear all the stuff out of your mouth, a police captain, and it's
and this will be archived. This will be recorded, and we'll make sure to continue to share this interview because we talked about a lot of fascinating things. This interview went way better than I thought it was going to. This has been awesome.
Great. Now, I would like to just get in one last comment for anybody out there who feels that the government is not as bad and corrupt as I make it out to be. I want to relate a quick story here. while at Zuccotti Park, I was holding my sign, and it said, to understand us, and meaning the occupiers, because people were walking by and they would shout bad things at us. And
get a job and all that.
Yeah, get a job, get a bath. And so I thought, they don't understand us, because they've been manipulated by the filthy rich who own the media. And so I made my sign say, to understand us, watch Inside Job. Inside Job is a documentary about that financial collapse of 2008. And if they watch that, they'll understand how corrupt the government is. So anyway, at Zuccotti Park, I was talking to this retired New York fireman. He fervently believed in this government, in the American capitalistic system. And we talked for about a half an hour. We were diametrically opposed to this government. But it was civil. He respected me, I respected him. And at the end, when we talked about a half an hour, I said, would you do me one thing? Would you watch Inside Job? 2008. It's narrated by Matt Damon, and he agreed. About 2 weeks later, I see him approaching me very solemnly. He puts his hand out. He gives me a firm handshake, but in a barely audible voice, he says, I am so sorry. I never knew.
Wow. I just got chills.
Yeah. That film enlightened him. And then he walked away, and he said he felt betrayed by his government. And I said, don't worry about feeling betrayed. We've all been betrayed. We're all in the same boat.
Wow.
Our government has betrayed us.
That reminds me of my what happened with my father. He was on the train, and he was speaking with this older gentleman, and he told him, the wars are started by the corporations.
Yes,
and then,
absolutely
and then the gentleman said, well, that's beneficial for our economy. My father said, no, the corporations are not paying their way. They're not paying their taxes. And, they went for a lengthy conversation. And at the end, the elderly man turned around, shook his hand, and said, you're right.
Wow.
So when when they say that, somebody that's old and stubborn, they're not going to change their mind, they're brainwashed, they're beyond, opening their eyes, that's not true. If you just sit down and talk to somebody and let them use their logic, and anybody can open their eyes, and it's really an inspirational thing.
Yeah, that's a good story too on the train. But guys, you yourselves watch Inside Job. It has nothing to do with the Twin Towers. It's all about the financial collapse. It's free on the internet. At,
I think I've seen part of it. Yeah, I like Matt Damon too. He's that's good.
Very good. It's at Vimeo, Vimeo, or filmsforaction.org, and there's several other sites that you can bring up Inside Job and watch it for free on the internet. So, guys, it was my pleasure. I enjoyed talking with you, and I look forward to being interviewed again on your show.
Thanks so much, Ray.
All right. Good night now.
Honored to have you, Ray.
Good night.
Chris, you must be in shock right now. You weren't expecting it to be this good, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I've never heard an interview he did where he talked about so much stuff. Like, the things that our journalists are afraid to ask him, we asked him. And he responded in a way like, wow, he's saying this.
Well, yeah.
A former police captain,
I was thinking with the part about 9/11, that was the one where I was like, I'm probably stretching it here. I'm probably stretching, what he's going to want to talk about. He's probably going to feel uncomfortable. No, you answered that smoothly. I've had people that were, supposedly more, anti-government than him, feel more uncomfortable, talking about that,
This is up there with my interview with Chomsky, man. This is one of the best interviews I ever did, that we did.
Yeah, and the great thing is about this interview is that, how many, I put this in groups that have people from the weirdest countries, from, Bangladesh to back to Venezuela to, there's people that are going to be listening to this internationally.
English is the universal language. Many activists speak English throughout the world, and I hope they'll be listening in. And I'm going to put up the link, and in the link I'm going to say he talks about this, and this, and tag some people in it. Because when you put specifics after the show like that, and it's recorded, they'll listen. I could be like, this is Ray Lewis, and people know who he is. This is Ray Lewis talking about 9/11, about the case of Marty Droll. I'll share that on Marty's page. The case of this, of this, of this. If you share it with specifics like that, they're gonna be like, no, Ray's talking about that, and then we can get some hits and we can get some awareness, and eventually do a follow up with Ray as well. That would be awesome.
Yeah, and also there's another thing about all this is that it's just like this. Yeah, this is just just a great interview, and it went smoothly. It went so smoothly, and then when you brought up Marty, and he responded to that, and then he said that he had saw something about that, prior about a guy dying suspiciously back in May. I was pretty shocked, because I didn't think that had much coverage. So it seems like
we're going contacts, man. You know what I mean? He's a former police captain. I mean, there's a lot of cops that don't like him in Philly, but trust me, he's the guy you want to know when you want to find out the truth about these things.
And that's the thing is that because of him saying that, I think that soon we're going to, finally come to a more awareness about our friend Marty, who was the original commander of the RLP. Finally, maybe we'll find
the Red Panther Brigade as well. Yeah.
And then finally, him, finally getting awareness out about that. Eventually that might lead to it. People demanding, that there's an explanation. And then we'll finally find out.
And
one day,
cops, a lot of times you think that they be against self-defense. That they say that there's something the state should have, that police should have, but that the average citizen should have the means to defend themselves. He's obviously not of that view either, and that also surprised me because a lot of the occupiers are, fervent pacifists. Like there's no form to defend yourself. You have to be completely nonviolent. But a lot of people out of the Occupy movement, including Ray Lewis, are open to alternative ways to defend yourself, and I think that's a good thing.
That's really important. Honestly, we've mentioned this many times about the need for a workers' militia, or in this case, the Oath Keepers. There needs to be somebody because the thing is that an unpeaceful enemy is not afraid to kill people by the thousands. We need to have somebody that's ready to.
And I've been working all day, Chris. You know that, massacre. But I feel the adrenaline right now. Talking with Ray, it was awesome.
Yeah, I admit I kind of felt kind of groggy before the show, and now I'm awake. And I'm just shocked how smoothly that went. That was a very smooth interview. I mean, there's been other interviews that I, thought were going to go better than that, and didn't turn out that good. And this one is kind of the opposite. I was kind of mixed. Yeah. I was thinking, I've never talked to Ray Lewis. I don't know what he might think, especially. I didn't know what he might think.
Remember what he said about being
teenager interviewing.
Remember what he said about being arrested, that he felt a great sense of pride, and you do. Because normally when you get arrested, right, it's for something stupid, you feel ashamed. But when you're arrested for a cause greater than yourself, and you're willing to sacrifice yourself, you feel such an incredible amount of pride, and you even smile. That picture of him, when he's being arrested, he has a very stern look on his face. I'm sure there was a time when he was smiling as well, because he felt the pride and that he was tired of the brutality against these young people fighting for a better future, and he himself put himself on the line. And that's something that's very powerful that us activists understand,
Yeah, those words are pretty powerful, and also the fact, the fact that, again, that all the stuff that he said, is we're going to be able to put that we got him to, say that. He talks about these things that other journalists, weren't even able to get him to talk about, like 9/11.
Well, you know what? A lot of journalists want to be friendly with Chomsky. Let me give you a perfect example. Abby Martin. I know her views. She's very conspiratorial, probably even more than me. But when Abby Martin talked to Chomsky in that nice little interview in Boston, because she put up on her page, I'm going to go talk to Chomsky. And I already been in touch with her. I was supposed to go on her show once. And I was like, ask him the tough questions, Abby. Ask him what I asked him on Blog Talk Radio. Guess what she did? The exact opposite. She asked him all these easy questions, didn't mention anything conspiratorial, only questions that them two would agree with. Had a friendly little interview. I don't like when the tough questions. And for years after that interview, he maintained contact with me because he respected that I asked him those tough questions. That's what a real journalist does. I'm going to try to bash Abby here. I'm just saying in general, you got to ask those tough questions sometimes, and you might be surprised by their response. As a matter of fact, in many interviews, Chomsky has completely rejected conspiracies. And in my interview, because it was friendly, but then I came out with the tough questions, he said, actually, no, this could be proven. He said, in MIT, they could do a science project and prove the towers fell that way. And then he said, then I would agree it was a conspiracy. So go ahead and try to prove it. That's what he was saying. He wasn't saying it's impossible. So if you ask the right questions, and this is the brilliant thing about journalism, if you ask the right questions in the right setting, you're going to be surprised a lot of times how they respond.
Yeah, talk about tough questions. I mean, I don't like when people do that in interviews, just bring up stuff that they both know they're going to agree with, and you feel tempted to do that sometimes as a journalist because you just don't want to have a conflict with somebody, especially when they're famous, more famous than you, but you have to do it. You can't just agree with everything and then, sacrifice your belief just so you can agree with whoever. Like when I had way back Fritz Springmeier back in the summer, it was a pretty big interview, and he's on the more Christian side of the conspiracy spectrum. So there's some serious, there's some serious things we disagreed on. One of the main things that we disagreed on was socialism. He thought that the New World Order was a socialist entity, and
I'm sorry, you just can't control myself when I hear that.
Yeah, he thought that Nazi Germany was socialist for one thing, which was horribly historically inaccurate. Yeah, he thought that Nazi Germany was socialist. He thought that that there was no difference between socialism and fascism.
Somebody asked me once, wasn't Trujillo and Castro of the same ideology? I'm like, excuse me? Castro was going to overthrow Trujillo. I mean, they're exact opposites. But people just don't know their history, unfortunately, or they confuse the ideologies. It's really sad.
Yeah, you would think that also that, just saying that Fritz Springmeier, who spent, years in a federal prison, that he would have took the time in federal prison to learn a bit about history, for him not to say that socialism and fascism were the same thing.
That's all I do if I was in jail is read books. That's what I do a lot on my job, read books. Read your history, know your facts, and don't just look shit up on the internet. Yeah,
if that ever unfortunately happened to me, that's what I would end up doing. I wouldn't just sit there and let it become a negative.
Well, you know what? That's probably what Michael Holman's doing right now. I want to give a shout out to Michael Holman. He's in jail now for underage drinking, and it was a very excessive sentence, if you ask me. And I think that they targeted him, number one, because he's Russian, and number two, because he's an activist.
Yeah, of course. We've got to put, solidarity with Michael Holman. I mean, he's right.
What is he, 20? Right? He was a few months away from being 21. They're going to put him in jail. Was it 3 months now? This is ridiculous. He's been on our show, by the way. Mike, he's in jail right now.
He was a co-host. He's one of the team,
Right.
And now
he was starting to become a co-host.
And then he's not going to get to listen to the show probably for a few months, but I think he'll be glad to hear that we didn't forget about him. We didn't just
he'll be very
act
glad
like
to
it
know
never
that we
happened.
interviewed Ray Lewis.
Yeah, I even told him that we were interviewing Ray Lewis right before he went to jail. So
before he went to sentencing. Yeah. So many of our comrades have been thrown in jail, died in mysterious circumstances like Marty, but it's good to know that we have people like Ray Lewis out there that are brave, that'll go in their uniform and willing to be arrested and willing to speak out and willing to answer the questions fearlessly as he did today.
And, the thing about this, I wonder how many people might have mistakenly listened to this interview thinking that it was something else. Because I shared this stuff on my wall.
Yeah, they
probably thought I was interviewing.
Thing. Then they'll change their mind.
But they thought they were listening to the pro football player, and then all of a sudden they ended up hearing this guy.
That'd be even worse. Well, you know what? That reminds me of an idea I came up with my comrade Liz over here. We want to do a thing called Occupy Tailgate. You know how they do tailgate at the football games?
Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to serve people their food at the football games as tailgate out of her truck, and then tell them activist stuff. It'd be like an undercover thing, which I think would be interesting. I mean, it goes back to the Roman Colosseum. The gladiators. That's how they kept the masses happy. Threw them bread and played games and sports, and kept their minds up. How are we going to get together to change the world? That's what the whole reality TV thing and the spectacle. I'm not saying sports is a bad thing, but they're using it to distract the masses. What they need to focus on is how can we get together and change this unjust system.
Yeah. We just ended buck season, but maybe we'll do that. We'll do that somewhere else, and we'll go over to the Amalie Arena
we'll
and then
we'll go
the Lightning
car
game
to St. Pete and bring you to Occupy Tailgate. How about that?
Or yeah, or we can do it. Think about St. Pete. I'll let you come over to St. Pete. I'll just go right over, not that far away, and then we'll do that at Tropicana Field, outside of Tropicana Field.
People that think that I hate Occupy, but speaking to people like Ray Lewis, it makes me remember the real guys that were there in the beginning, not the infiltrators that are running what's left now. Huh?
Yeah, and anyways, 347-205-9576 if you want to talk about the interview. We'll take some questions. But yeah, you
said something very important, Chris. He said something very important. He said there was infiltrators from the very beginning, Al. And you know what?
Well, yeah.
That really makes me aware more of what happened to me. It really is how they set me up, because there was people from the very beginning. Those people that I thought were my comrades that turned on me, it wasn't them turning on me. It was them from the beginning planning to go after who was going to be the next leader.
Yeah,
it's that new camp that was going to come about. I was going to be one of the organizers, and that was prevented.
Well,
you know what I'm talking about, and it's in my book.
The new wave anarchists, the feminists, those people that,
some of those people were not really even of that ideology. They were working for the government the whole time. And Ray Lewis knows this well.
Yeah, and that's the people that you don't like, and they accuse you of not liking Occupy because you don't like them, which is absolutely absurd. It's Occupy is, of course, we support it. We don't support the infiltrators in there because they ruined the movement. They start. Those are the people that make the same possible, that the revolution won't be televised; it'll be controlled secretly, and that's unfortunate. That's how Occupy went down. Occupy could have been the revolution, but unfortunately, its demise was by infiltrators. In a covert, in other covert agents. And then the second time around, like we put in the manifesto, it needs to be done a whole different way. We need to have our own intelligence, our own militias, to do this revolution differently the second time and be successful. But if it's done like Occupy, of course we're not going to have any success.
And activism gives you a base to confront powerful people. We talked about that as well. I mean, you wouldn't have had the opportunity to know that specific person was going to be at that event that we could confront if it wasn't for organizing. A lot of these new wave anarchists, and some of them are not agents, they firmly believe in their ideology. Some of these guys, they're against organization, but you know what? They wouldn't even known about Occupy. They wouldn't even known about that protest if it wasn't for organization. So whatever their interpretation of what organization is, movements cannot exist without it. Because if you don't have it, you're only a tactic. You're not an organization. That's what Chomsky said recently. He said Occupy was not a movement. It was a tactic. And it was good while it lasted. What we need to focus on now is forming a movement. That's what we need to do.
Well, yeah. What I was going to say is that also the new wave anarchists, this is an example of how they defeated themselves, since they opposed any organization, they also opposed these, they opposed these leaders that were willing to help Occupy overseas. Like who came to Occupy, one of the most prominent leaders that came to Occupy was Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. They protested him instead of the government, that is against Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and against the people of the United States, and that they're trying to take down the tyrannical government of the United States. Instead of letting, him convey his support to Occupy, at least give him a chance, no, they immediately started protesting against them. That's a prime example.
Well, I can understand if there's a Democrat. There was a Democrat that tried to infiltrate Occupy, a congressman. I don't forget which. He showed up, and they were not very receptive of him. Don King showed up. They were not very receptive of him either. Don King was trying to, this capitalist was trying to show support for Occupy and all this hypocrisy. And somebody said to him, "How did it feel to use Muhammad Ali?" And he said, and then Don King responded and said, "It felt good to use him to make him a millionaire." Because that's the mentality of a capitalist. A capitalist exploits somebody, make a little bit of money for them, and they get all the money for themselves. And their mentality is, well, I'm making money for them. You know what I mean? But when these politicians and these capitalists showed up with Occupy, they didn't physically throw them out, but they were not very receptive of them, and I can completely understand that. But if you're talking about an international figure here like Ahmadinejad, I mean, we should have a little bit of respect, but you know what I mean.
And, well, yeah, that's the thing. He wasn't a capitalist. In fact, Ahmadinejad had portrayed it, he had portrayed his support for Occupy for the reasons of anti-capitalism from the very beginning, of the movement. He and Chavez, also Hugo Chavez, also expressed their extreme concern of how the Occupy protesters were being treated during the event. But, and here's the thing about the new wave anarchists, because they heard these rumors on the corporate media, your CNN, your MSNBC, your Fox, all lying, because they wanted to do regime change in these countries and want to, benefit the elite that want to, put new governments that are friendly to them. These new wave anarchists believe whatever, that all these rumors, so they believe that Ahmadinejad is really this monster that wants to nuke Israel, which that was a mistranslation. Found out later he didn't say wipe Israel off the map. He said wipe the government of Israel away, which what he meant by that is to wipe it from this. He wanted the Zionist policies to go away. He wanted the Palestinians to be free. It was not wipe Israel away as in nuke them, like the West tried to make it seem like. Or like with Chavez, they believe that he's this person that, starves people and blah, blah, blah. All the accusations. I don't even want to go into it about Hugo Chavez, which almost all corporate media fabrications. Okay?
What's incredible, Chris? I felt earlier, I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to say I felt earlier like I wanted to walk to the ATM and make a deposit, and I'm like, I'm so exhausted. I'm going to go home. I'm going to do the interview and sleep. I'm so full of energy now with how well this interview went that I'm ready to walk down to that bank now. But, this just was a wonderful interview, and I can't wait to share it. And, Chris, we really got to share this link this time because we're used to doing shows and you're just leaving it. No, we got to keep sharing this link and give specifics and put the word out because this was a great interview, and I think it's going to bring a lot of awareness and a lot of inspiration.
And the listeners also need to do the same, because if you really believe in our message, you really want to help us, this is what you have to do. You have to share this to your friends. You have to make this viral. You got to make this a known interview. It's got to cause ripple.
I'm going to share it with my family. Absolutely.
You got to share with your friends, your family, your coworkers, even anybody that would be interested in listening to this, because this is one of those interviews that can change the minds of people. Hearing a former police, somebody that used to be on the inside, talk about the stuff that we talk about. His words, carry more weight, because this is somebody that used to be on the inside, and to Americans, they're trustworthy of their police, and often that's what causes problems. But this is one of, I rarely say this, but this is actually an example of a good cop. Those are very rare.
Have you ever seen Serpico, played by Pacino, about the cop who exposed police corruption in the 70s?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Right, he's at the level of Serpico, this guy, and he's still in this country. He's very brave, and I really got to commend him and thank him for the interview that he did with us, and I'm really looking forward to do a follow-up.
Yeah, usually, thinking about that, it's that he even stayed in this country. He stayed, many people at that level would be, they would be too afraid to stay, here.
They're threatening his pension, and he went to Ferguson to risk getting arrested again. So they're talking about taking his livelihood away, and he's still taking part in activism. That shows he's got principles.
That's more. This is. If you heard that right, when we, what we just heard, just about 40 minutes ago when he was talking about the part of when he was talking about who else didn't get commended despite what he the guy that was doing that was the horse riding training facility that the other officer was running. He literally he had sexual relations with a 14-year-old girl, and he didn't get the same flack that Ray Lewis did for simply wearing his uniform to a protest.
That reminds me, I got to send him the link on that pedophile case. But yeah, absolutely.
That says everything right there. That the police department is more concerned about it. And they are. He's really doing what the police duty should be. The police are supposed to be to protect and serve the people, or at least it was till 2005, until the Supreme Court ruled that police's only duty is to do law enforcement. Which that sounds like Nazi Germany. Enforce the laws is the only duty, no matter how draconian the law is.
That reminds me of an MLK quote. Martin Luther King said once, "Remember, everything that was done in Germany under the Nazis was legal." So just because something's legal doesn't make it's right,
And look, another thing is that, at least the duty used to be to protect and serve. And that's what he's doing. He's protecting and serving the people from the brutality of, the Ferguson Police Department and from the police departments of the country world of nationwide. This he was protecting and serving the people. He was doing his exact duty, which many police are actually too afraid to do, protect and serve.
Here we are, a former police captain, talking about how he felt about seeing tanks in Ferguson, talking about how it felt being arrested. This was a historic interview. I've gone through his interviews, and nothing came close to the emotion, to the passion that we had in this interview. We need to really share this.
Yeah, this is big. And, and Ray Lewis, if there's somebody that deserves the title, may Occupier 2014, that's him. That's the biggest story of Occupy 2014. It got
and the 2015, right?
So far. Yeah, and it's definitely was the biggest story of 2014, and now going into 2015, it's the beginning of the year. I just didn't say that because who knows what could happen this year. We might have this might be the year that there might be a breakthrough finally. Who knows? But we can only hope.
We sent a couple FEMA camps or Guantanamo, but who knows? And Martin Luther King had a sense of humor too. You see that in Selma. If you see the preview, even in the preview, they showed the scene where he's in the jail cell, and his comrade's talking in his ear, and he says, "We're probably bugged." Even in the jail cell, the government's bugging them, and literally, and it reminds me of a quote from Gandhi. I believe he said it in the 30s. He said, "If it wasn't for humor, I would have killed myself long ago." So the best revolutionaries, the best activists throughout history have had a sense of humor. And that's really a way to deal with the danger. You're the obvious danger that you point it out, but you say it in a humoristic way. It helps you psychologically deal with it. But that's the reality that's there,
We've talked a lot about this controlled opposition figure. I feel like that if one day me and Al were at the FEMA camp, we'd probably be like, "Hey, I bootlegged a radio," and then we turn on the radio and hear Alex Jones still broadcasting. He's still doing his show. He's still free. We just hear it's like, "I'm telling you, the FEMA camps are coming."
It's like, yeah, they already been here, idiot.
We're already here, and I feel like he'll be still free, and that'll probably prove it right there. But you have to have a sense of humor, because of course, if you don't have a sense of humor, if you're not optimistic, it's easy when you're talking about this dark stuff that goes on in this government. It's easy to get really down, and just kind of, you can't let that happen. That's because then you just kind of lose your morale. You have to keep the morale up. There's a reason why.
And how COINTELPRO works is first they blackmail you, then they defame you, and if that doesn't work, they kill you.
They can't.
And that's what they did with Martin Luther King. They blackmailed him because he cheated on his wife and had the recording. They even sent his wife to tape. You see that in the movie Selma. I don't want to give the whole thing away, but we know this happened, right? That his wife did actually hear the recording of the affair and did confront her husband on that. But he did love his wife, and it was Hoover threatening Martin Luther King months before that, saying, "Do not accept the Nobel Peace Prize. If you do, we're going to reveal this to your wife." And he went and accepted the prize and continued the march on Selma and wouldn't be intimidated. And subsequently, they did reveal the recording to his wife, and it never became public. But because they assassinated him, but blackmailing him, defaming him, calling him a communist, which was absurd. All these things, when that didn't work, what did they do? You're talking about COINTELPRO in the 70s. It was starting in the 60s. And subsequently, the last step, because nothing else worked, was assassination of MLK. And that's a really good example there. And hence, we have to have leadership, but not everything should depend on one person. In case that person is taken out or defamed, we should have somebody else to continue the mantle, to continue the torch towards the revolution.
And the thing is that, you have to have people that are ready in case the worst happens and the leader is taken out. The organization, you have to have people below. It's like, and then when the revolution's successful, like what happened in Venezuela, things happen. It looks like Chavez was taken out by a cancer weapon, and then eventually Maduro had to be the one that the torch was passed down to. But
all leaders
they were ready
know when to give up. And I think Maduro has to really consider the possibility of having to give in. And I don't say give in to the right opposition. Give in to other leaders within the Bolivarian Party that are younger that want to take over, because his popularity is down right now. I don't really necessarily think that's his fault. It's external circumstances. But rather than have the Bolivarians defeated and the right take over, he should give the mantle to somebody younger within the party. He has to start considering that right now.
Yeah, you can't let his ego and desire of power let the Bolivarian Revolution fail in 2018, and then within 20 years, the Bolivarian Revolution has ended. No, this needs to continue, and this whole wave, because this is like the heart of the Bolivarian Revolution of all South America, started in Venezuela. 98
yes,
started a whole wave,
which is fitting because that's the homeland of Bolivar.
Yes, I mean it is really fitting. It's the thing is that people say that Bolivar wouldn't be proud of Chavez. He would be.
That's ridiculous.
He would be very proud of Chavez. He's united South America like no leader has done since Bolivar's time.
Regardless of labels, whether or not you think Bolivar was a socialist, there's no doubt in everything that he stood for that he was an anti-imperialist. And he wasn't just an anti-Spanish imperialist. He was an anti-American imperialist. He was against monarchies, all types of imperialisms. He was a man of principle. And there's no doubt in anybody's mind that Chavez was an anti-imperialist and very much part of Bolivar's legacy.
Yes, and again, the thing is that there's so many accusations made about Chavez. It's one of the there's so many. You just go to my school and ask the Hispanic population at school, and they'll have so much to say about him. But they'll be all simplistic. Call him an asshole, call him a hater, call him a tyrant, call him a communist, a Stalinist.
We should call our show the Tangent Show. Voice of Rebellion, a.k.a. the Tangent Show. We'd like to go off on tangents when in school.
Yeah, it just happens, and that's how you have a show that goes on for hours. That's kind of a common radio thing we do. But and it eventually it does spice up. It spices up shows. And we have to go into detail sometimes because you have to realize that every show.
If you don't like history, don't listen to us. And if you don't like history, you're going to keep making the same mistakes.
Yes, the thing is that we have to give a background a lot of times because, I figure on every show that at least a couple people are listening are new listeners. Now, we have a lot of repeat listeners, but there's at least a few that are tuning in for the first time and might not have a clue of what's going on. So you have to give some insight or else they'll be completely lost and then give up on, knowing the real history of things. But, again, like I was saying, there's these leaders like Chavez or Aja Jimenez, so many accusations, and you just go around and ask people, but those people, those are two countries where a revolution was successful. Way back, Iran, it's been almost 40 years now, or actually, 35th anniversary just passed about a year ago.
Well, there's difference between being successful and not being defeated. The Ayatollahs up till now have not been defeated. The Chavistas up till now have not been defeated. The question is, at what cost? I think there are legitimate people on the left in Venezuela and Iran that haven't been given the rights that they expected. More so in Iran because I think Venezuela is a very leftist government. Iran did start out as an anti-imperialist government, and they've maintained that, and that's a good thing. But you also have to offer an alternative. An alternative is not the system that's in Iran, but a socialistic system, a democratic system. You could say that the system in Iran is very democratic, representative of the current demographics there. But you have to have a socialistic system. And we didn't really ask Ray about that because it's kind of irrelevant. But it's very clear that he doesn't like the system of capitalism. Maybe in the follow-up we can ask him what economic alternatives he would like. But capitalism, we know it. There was consensus there in Occupy. And capitalism, as it was in the 90s in Venezuela, is no more. In great part thanks to the leadership of Chavez. So Iran is a little different situation, but I think that in Venezuela need to maintain that, and the Maduro needs to consider to step down to salvage the Bolivarian Revolution.
Well, but here's the thing is that in many ways Iran and Venezuela are very similar, and Iran is still socialistic. They're very anti-capitalistic. You heard the rhetoric of Ahmadinejad, the Ayatollahs. They are very, and they're not anti-capitalist.
It's policy, not rhetoric. They're very religious, and Venezuela is very secular. I mean, Catholic. Chavez was a Catholic, but he wasn't, mixing religion with his politics and policy. You know what I mean? He believed in liberation theology, you could say, but not to the extent where he made religion official policy and state like they do in Iran.
But Iran, they've mixed it well, though, the socialism. They mixed it
they make
Well, Islam itself
principles.
is socialistic because they have to donate a part of their salary to charity. They don't do that in Christianity and Judaism.
And also here's another thing, is that because of their Islamic way they think, they have a lot more compassion towards poor people, and that's why they've given them
And Shia
free
could care less if they make a depiction of the Prophet Muhammad. We know this. Look at what Hezbollah just said about the cartoonists. They said that the terrorists that killed the cartoonists did more damage to Islam than the cartoonists themselves. Right. It's certain Sunni groups that really take offense to these things. We shouldn't make a broad stereotype about Islam in general on that.
And here's another thing about that is that for them to say that, I'm not even I don't follow Islam, and yet I was disturbed by what Charlie Hebdo had drawn up. These things were disgusting, filthy. However, I don't support him being killed over it or a terrorist over it. I condemn them. But
and that itself could have been a false flag. Even Ray acknowledges that the false flags go on. Paul Craig Roberts is there's a lot of questionable things about him, but he did make a good point that the CIA wanted France to get behind U.S. foreign policy because they started considering doing relations with Russia again. And then the timing of it, all of a sudden this happens. It could have been a CIA operation to get
the
France in line.
France had just was about to recognize Palestine, and I find it ironic that Netanyahu.
And you know what's ironic because
it's
illegal now to demonstrate in favor of Palestine in France. They're the first country to have done it. There's a lot of contradictions about France. I mean, Hollande claims to be a socialist, the French president, but it's all fake.
Honestly, what I think is that this is France as being France. It's a history of the French government being like this. They always are. Kind of.
Well, you know what?
wishy-washy.
Jacques Chirac, you got to give him credit. He vetoed. Russia didn't have the balls to do this. Jacques Chirac vetoed the U.S. going into Iraq. And I remember when that happened. It wasn't that far back, 2003. So you got to give Jacques Chirac some credit there, even though he's a conservative. Clearly, on foreign policy, he's of the left.
Maybe. Well, he was he was the first leader. I found out today to have visited the United States after 9/11. Maybe he realized that he knew, of course, that there's no connection to Iraq and 9/11, even the official story. But he probably saw.
Well, the French did go to Afghanistan, but you're right. And when it came to Iraq, Chirac was very aware that Iraq had nothing to do with it. He didn't want to go along with Bush's plan. He saw it for what it was.
He probably saw something fishy was there because he was there right after it happened. I mean, within a couple days, I think he was the first foreign leader to come to the United States.
That could be
after
true
9/11.
as well. There was an Italian, I believe, an Italian minister who talked about how the Mossad was involved with 9/11. I think both the Mossad and the CIA. But we're going way too off topic here. I think we got to wrap up soon. I want to start promoting the show. Any last comments, Chris?
Yeah. I found that out. But about because the French were supposedly mad that no U.S. politicians were over in France today. But during they had that big rally or whatever.
U.S. politicians going to Paris to show solidarity.
Because here's what I think is that I think that these people that attacked the cartoonist and did the recent terrorist attacks were in fact people that had been funded by the United States in the past. And that these people are probably ISIS, related.
That's indisputable, Chris. ISIS is taking responsibility now, or at least Al Qaeda. And both ISIS and Al Qaeda did get U.S. funding at one point, either to topple Gaddafi or Assad. So that's pretty indisputable at this point. What is being disputed is, was it a false flag? Were these actually white guys that were CIA agents that weren't even Muslim that were behind the masks? Who knows? Either way, the U.S. has some of its fingerprints on this. And it needs to be investigated.
There was a funny picture I saw that was on Facebook. It was like they found another ID at the scene of the Paris terrorist attack, and it was from Superbad, the McLovin ID. Because remember how he got the suit. It was from if you ever saw the movie Superbad, the high schooler. The high schooler gets a super fake ID. His name is McLovin. He says he's 25. Okay. He doesn't even look anywhere close to that. It's like they're saying how fake that is. That they think that how fake that is that the terrorist left his ID behind. Which, that's pretty questionable. Apparently, they've found the passports of 9/11 and the same thing at Paris. And they did everything else right, left their IDs. You'd think that they'd be like, before we go out and do this, we're going to leave our IDs at home just in case, they fall out of our pocket or something.
Well, also they said that when they approached the woman that let them in who survived, who let them in the building where the journalists were killed, that they said, by the way, we're Al-Qaeda. It doesn't really work like that. You'd think they'd do an operation, they finish it, and then later the group would take responsibility. But they're going up there and saying, oh, by the way, we're Al-Qaeda, and here's our ID. I mean, that sounds pretty fake to me. But and they're going to send bicycle cops with the terror attack. I mean, and if you see the footage of the head getting blown off of the cop, the head was never blown off. You see where the bullet landed. It didn't land in his head. So either he was killed later, or when he hit the ground, it was a shot to the heart and it was fatal. It looked like he was alive and talking, though, before the final blow, and there was no final blow. If you actually see the footage that was edited out, there was no headshot. So what happened to this cop? So there's a lot of questionable things there, but we're going to have to leave that topic for another show. So,
well, I'll say one thing is that I'm not going to say Jesus Charlie. I'm going to say Jesus Ahmed. He was the bicycle cop that was protecting Charlie from getting from the.
Yeah, he was a
attack.
Muslim.
And yes, that's what I'm saying. Is that I'm behind him. I'm not behind Charlie, who was obviously a racist cartoonist, or I'm going to say I'm behind the people that were after him. That's it for tonight, folks. That was a great interview. This is Voice of Rebellion Radio. We're going to say stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay awake.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, bought a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my real top niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day peppering America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosure that close out the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit, bitch, if not, better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas to get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at you, I own every gold mine in South Africa, thanks baby, you made me $1 billion, plus I own a building, for each one of my